All right. Apparently, ABC News and ESPN reporting that legendary Penn State football coach Joe Paterno will step down at the end of the season. The word is retire. That is what ESPN is saying. Also, ABC News going forward with it as well. Joe Paterno set to retire at the end of the season. This, of course, coming after these allegations of Jerry Sandusky molesting young boys. You know, Penn State football players who played for assistant coach Jerry Sandusky are pretty shocked and saddened by these child rape charges against Sandusky. And earlier this morning, I got a chance to speak exclusively with Brian Scott. He's a former Penn State star. He's now playing with the Buffalo Bills. And we actually talked about Jerry Sandusky's son, John, who Brian roomed with. You know, Brian, you said you haven't had a chance to actually talk to John, but if you could, if he sees this interview, what do you want to say to him?
I just want to let him know that, John, I know you're going through a really, really tough time, man. And, you know, I'm supporting you from a distance. I know it's not easy by any means,
Brian, how about these young boys that Sandusky allegedly preyed on and molested? What do you say to them?
Oh, my heart, it bleeds for them, for the families. Man, words, you can't put into words probably what that they're going through, not just now, but back then, and having to stay quiet for so long. So my thoughts and prayers are with all of the victims.
You know Joe Paterno, too. What should happen to him? If these allegations of a cover-up are true, what should happen to Joe Paterno?
And this is where I guess it gets really dicey, because I don't know what was told to Coach Paterno, and I started to hear rumors and comments that, he cared too much about winning in the football program than he did about the lives of these boys. But Coach Paterno, that's the same coach that I've seen sit down players because their grades weren't high enough to his standards, not to Big Ten standards, not to NCAA standards, but to his standards. So I just find it really hard to believe that Coach Paterno would turn a cheek knowing these allegations like this and not saying anything.
And final question, Brian, if indeed all of this proves true, that Sandusky did molest these boys, what do you think should happen to him?
You know, he's going to have to pay the consequences. There's no doubt about it. You know, what those consequences are, you know, I'm sure the legal system will decide, but he definitely has to pay the consequences.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up our interview, Brian?
No, this is just, you know, it's just a sad day. I'm saddened for, you know, these stories developing. I'm saddened for the families that are going through this. I'm saddened for the Sandusky family, because I know, you know, the man of your family is now accused of these allegations. I'm saddened for the Penn State family, you know, but we'll get through this. I think the Penn State family will continue to support each other and rally behind each other, and we'll get through it.
Brian Scott, sure appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Legendary Penn State coach Joe Paterno is going to retire now at the end of the season. His record-breaking career ends as a former defensive coach, as Jerry Sandusky faces charges of molesting 8 boys. Our Jason Carroll, he is joining us from the Penn State campus. So, Jason, tell us how this came about. Everybody's been wondering and watching whether or not Paterno would survive this scandal. How did it go down?
Well, there's a lot of back and forth going on, Suzanne. You remember yesterday there was going to be a press conference that was canceled at the last minute. Then last night there was a rally in front of Joe Paterno's home. From many of those people who showed up were students asking him to stay, shouting his name. But there were increasing calls for this man to step down, saying that legally he did probably what he was supposed to do in terms of reporting that allegation of sexual abuse, which allegedly occurred right here on campus. But morally, he just didn't do enough. And just about an hour ago, Paterno released a statement saying that he grieved for the families. I want you to read part of the statement. He said, quote, "This is a tragedy. It is one of the great sorrows of my life. With the benefit of hindsight, I wish I had done more." So obviously some regret there, but I also want you to listen to what Paterno said to all of those supporters who showed up at his house last night.
My wife and I, we have 17 grandkids, from 16 to 3, and we pray for them every night. And we're going to start praying for those kids that got involved with some of the problems that we talked about. Right? They don't deserve it. They have, and we owe it to them to say a prayer for them.
This is a man who was a legend in the world of collegiate football, 46 years as head coach here at Penn State, winningest coach in collegiate football history. He now becomes the third school official to have to step down in the wake of this scandal. Suzanne?
Jason, we know that the Penn State Board of Trustees, they say they're outraged. They're planning on investigating. Do we know if they're going to investigate not only Sandusky, but also Paterno and perhaps other officials? Is he involved in that investigation? Are they going to be looking at him as well?
Absolutely, without question. The Board of Trustees on Friday will be putting together a special committee to basically investigate the way the university as a whole responded to these allegations of sexual abuse. So they'll be looking at everyone who played a role. And I've got to say, when it comes to that, there have been just as many critics who've been pointing their finger at Penn State's president, Graham Spanier. They basically say, while a lot of the attention was focused on Paterno for obvious reasons, the buck, critics say, really stops with him. Suzanne?
And Jason, I really don't want this to get lost in this story. We keep talking about Penn State and, the fall of these legends. But what about these alleged victims here? These young boys who allegedly were sexually abused and who are now grown men. Is there any sense of where they are, who they are, and how they're doing?
Well, when it comes to that investigation, obviously the focus of that investigation is former assistant coach Jerry Sandusky. Sandusky, as you know, is out on $100,000 bail. He right now stands accused of molesting 8 boys, all of them grown at this point. But I have to say, the Attorney General on Monday said that given the fact that Sandusky had access to young children for such a long period of time, there would be the possibility in her eyes that more victims would come forward. And a source close to the investigation spoke to me and said that their tip line, police tip line, has been inundated with calls from people coming in. They say more than a dozen calls have come in from people alleging to also have been victimized by Sandusky. So that investigation still well underway. Suzanne?
All right, Jason, thanks once again. Do we expect any formal statements coming from the university or officials today? Do we know?
Well, it's anyone's guess. This story just seems to change. 1 minute you say something, then the next minute it changes. We are hearing that perhaps Sandusky might say something a little later on today. Again, he has released the statement. So anyone who knows not Sandusky, but Paterno. Anyone who knows Paterno knows that Paterno is a man who is outspoken. And, sometimes people tell him to keep quiet and he goes out and says something else. So perhaps we'll hear something from Paterno later today.
All right, Jason, thank you so much. Well, yesterday I talked to a former Penn State student who demanded that Paterno step down. So how does she feel now that he's going to be leaving at the end of the season? We're going to ask her. Well, after 46 years at the helm of Penn State football, Joe Paterno announced that he's going to retire at the end of the season. The move comes as his former defensive assistant, Jerry Sandusky, faces child molestation charges. Now, Paterno is not accused of a crime, but he went to university officials, not police, when a witness told him he saw Sandusky sodomize a child in the athletes' showers. In a statement, Paterno says, "This is a tragedy. It is one of the great sorrows of my life. With the benefit of hindsight, I wish I had done more." So, if you don't follow college football, you have to understand that the folks on campus say that Joe Paterno is a godlike figure at Penn State. He's a head football coach with a squeaky clean reputation. He has led the Penn State football program since 1966. He's the longest-serving coach in college football. Paterno also holds the record for the most wins in NCAA Division I football. That is 409. The Nittany Lions have won 2 national championships under Paterno in 1982 and again 1986. So, we'll again talk to our Penn State alum about the developments in this sex abuse case, Roxanne Jones. She is the CEO of Push Marketing Group and a founding editor of ESPN, the magazine. So, Roxanne, you and I, we spoke yesterday. You were calling for the resignation of Paterno. You said you were sickened by the fact that there were those who looked the other way while children allegedly were abused to protect this football program. What's your reaction now that Paterno has decided he's going to step down?
Well, first, the whole story is very sad, but I am glad that Coach has stepped down. I'm glad that he made this decision. He also said in his release that the Board of Trustees and everybody else has a lot more important things to spend their time on than whether he stays or goes. And so I think this is the right move.
Do you think it's appropriate? He's retiring. He's not really completely out of Penn State, right? I mean, I imagine that he would have some sort of package. He would be able to use the facilities, that there's a difference between retirement and being fired.
That's exactly right. And you bring up a very good point. I mean, the debate wasn't really for me and law enforcement and probably the family of these boys whether he is allowed to walk out gracefully on his own terms. It was, what did he know? When did he know it? Why didn't he do something? And should he be fired? I think what we're seeing, if this comes to be in the resignation, is out of respect for his very long tenure, 60 years at the university. But this is a serious case and serious wrongdoing. And so I think this is a graceful exit. It's a gift for him to be able to retire because there are still serious questions.
And there are serious questions, questions we still don't know the answers to, quite frankly. There's an investigation going on. But do we suspect that there are any legal issues involved, perhaps even the university facing some sort of lawsuits by the family members of these alleged victims?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have spoken this morning to law enforcement officials, and I'm by no means a lawyer, but I think some of the serious questions that will be asked is what really happened. Were these boys who are alleging they were molested taken across state lines to go to away games? Were they abused inside of Penn State hotels? Were they on Penn State planes and buses? I mean, those are very, very serious criminal accusations, and certainly I would expect lawsuits to follow, but I don't think that we really have enough details. I do know that there are many, many, many more questions that need to be asked of Coach Paterno and everybody else involved on the Penn State side.
Sure. For those of us who don't know this coach and really don't have a sense of the kind of culture at Penn State, Roxanne, can you explain to us why there were so many students that were outside his home rallying in his defense during this time?
Well, he is a good man. He's a good man, and the culture of Penn State is that he's bigger than a man. He's an idol. He's God. He's done so many things. And you know, when I was in school, I protested for many, many things and felt very passionately about them. And once you grow up and you learn, I think that the passion and the concern needs to stay focused on the families and the boys involved in this case. It's very nice to stand by Coach Paterno. He's a decent man. But there are serious allegations, and sometimes very decent people do bad things. They make a wrong decision, and I think that is exactly what Coach Paterno was saying. I wish I had done more, because he knows that, forget about the law, he should have done more. And there's no reason to rally behind that. That is, he didn't step up and be the man that he's expecting all of his other young men to be, and he's admitted that today.
It sounds like he disappointed himself in some ways. Right. Roxanne Jones, thank you very much for putting it all into perspective, obviously as a campus alum and somebody who has been covering this. Appreciate it. Well,
thank you.